Sorry, I got a little excited and we got disconnected. Back to where's Waldo? Waldo's born again. And I believe Waldo's in heaven, and we're going to find where's Waldo, and he is going to be in heaven because he loved God and he found God in the Bible. Needless to say, I was telling you how what he believed. He believed in receiving Jesus by faith and knowing him in a personal way. Needless to say, the church at that time thought this was just craziness to them. So you have to go through a priest, and you have to go to confession, and you have to go to mass, and you have to be baptized, and you have to do all this sacraments, and you have to do this and this. They had long lists, and then you can buy indulgences if you need some extra help to get to heaven. Waldo's like, it doesn't work that way, and he was really happy to tell them, but they were not so happy with Waldo, so they excommunicated him from the church, and they persecuted and killed many of his followers. He was not killed. He escaped many times. I guess the Lord, protected him. Peter Waldo moved his family to Bohemia. And in Bohemia, do you remember in Bohemia before? In Bohemia, they had heard the gospel in Moravia before there. And so they were so open to hear the gospel that hundreds and hundreds of Bohemians came to the Lord. And Waldo, he died, they think, when he was like 77 years old, somewhere in Bohemia, happy to go to heaven. Well, the Waldensians, they copied the Bibles into French, and as they went door to door, they led humble, simple lives. And the church at that time, the Roman Catholic Church, thought them as very, very ignorant and uneducated and non-ordained, all these things. But they loved the Lord. And as they shared the gospel, Bohemians got saved in droves. And Peter Waldo's his words echoed throughout the country. He says, how can I be silent when it concerns the souls of men? He would give his life over 100 million times for one soul to be saved. The Waldensians were very popular in France. And in fact, the people loved them because they, first of all, were filled with joy, and they were filled with love, and they were easy to understand. They were understandable. They didn't speak Latin, and through all of that, they were drawn to this in the midst of a dark, dark time. 1184, the Pope condemned all Waldensians were accursed, and all French Bibles, any translation, should be burned. Now they had to go around secretly, but they still went around secretly. Call that going underground. And whoever helped them would be persecuted. If you helped a Waldensian, you too could be put to death. Many people were put to death, but they were put to death singing hymns. Happy to go, They didn't have fair trials, but Jesus didn't have a fair trial. They didn't have attorneys, but Jesus didn't have an attorney. No one could be their witnesses, and they had false witnesses. Jesus had false witnesses. 80,000 Bohemian Waldensians were killed. And that's not including all of them that died in France and Italy. A great move of God. The more that were martyred, the more got saved. That's the way it goes with God. It's opposite this world. More martyrs, more believers. Many retreated to the mountains to hide, and in the Italian mountains, there's still probably some leftover Waldensians back there, born-again Christians that their parents and great-grandfathers and great-great-great-grandfathers knew the Lord. Many of them died with the Bible in their hand. Their Bibles were taken, but guess what? More were copied. Their tears of water became tears of blood, and they gave their lives. The Pope sent 15,000 soldiers just to kill these Christians. He was a little confused, I would say. But Peter Waldo, in 1100s, started a movement 400 years before the Reformation of the church. And we'll be talking about that later with Martin Luther and John Hus and a whole bunch of other priests. They actually were priests that were born again. Don't you love this Bible? Oh, I love the Word of God. I just want it every day. Don't you? I hope so.